You can't reason with the sun. Trust us, we've tried. This summer, it's time to put that angry ball of fire on mute. Columbia's Omni-Shade technology is engineered to protect you from the sun's harsh rays that can burn and damage your skin. The sun is relentless, but so is our gear. Level up your summer at Columbia.com to spend more time outside and less time slathering on aloe lotion. You're welcome. Columbia, engineered for whatever.
No one goes to Hank's for his spreadsheets. They go for a darn good pizza. Lately, though, the shop's been quiet, so Hank decides to bring back the $1 slice. He asks Copilot in Microsoft Excel to look at his sales and costs and help him see if he can afford it. Copilot shows Hank where the money's going and which little extras make the dollar slice work. Now Hank has a line out the door. Hank makes the pizza, Copilot handles the spreadsheets. Learn more at m365copilot.com/work.
They say you should learn something new every day. Like how you should only drink Jägermeister at 0 degrees Fahrenheit, ice cold. Like those frozen cavemen they find. Which makes you wonder, what would a caveman think of Jägermeister? Well, if you served it warm, he'd probably throw it in your face, say, "Unga boonga," and storm off. And nobody wants that. So drink it cold or not at all. Jägermeister. Damn, that's cold. Drink responsibly. Jägermeister liqueur, 35% alcohol by volume. Imported by Mast Jägermeister, U.S., White Plains, New York.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn and welcome to Haway The Podcast as you join our Sunday supplement, as we always hope to provide a little more analysis and perspective after a good night's sleep after every Sunderland game over a strong coffee. And today we look back on a Saturday afternoon that should really have ended with Sunderland taking all 3 points. That would have seen us sitting 8th in the league table and just a point behind high-flying Brentford, who currently sit in 6th. But an everyday tussle between a centre-half and a striker was adjudged to have got out of control. And Regis Labrissa's lads did well to come away with a point in the end. So there's a lot to unpack on what will probably be a forgettable afternoon in the context of this season. But to perhaps make it a little bit more memorable, I luckily have a couple of gentlemen who can hopefully provide a bit of insight into yesterday's proceedings. And first up, we have our very own Martin Molineux. Hello, Martin.
Hello, Chris. How are you, mate?
I'm not bad. I'm a little bit confused, conflicting feelings, as I think we've had with a lot of games lately, except maybe the Forest game. But yeah, I'm looking forward to you two sorting it out for me today. But just before we get into the game, Martin, the news that David Bruce has rocked up at Sheffield Wednesday, and I thought actually before we get into the ins and outs of the game, it would be good to have a little comment on what you think about that.
Yeah, it was no surprise, was it? Because it's been talked about quite widely for the last few weeks. So it was good to see all of that confirmed for him. And I still feel a bit confused and conflicted by that whole situation as well. It's not clear why the club have got rid of him. He's done a exceptionally good job on the face of things, hasn't he, since he's been at the club? He really understands the fans and the club and the history of everything and all of that sort of stuff, which is natural from being a Sunderland supporter. But he's got huge experience in the MLS, and we saw the good and the benefit of that throughout his time at Sunderland. So I still feel as if the club have made. I was going to say I feel as if the club made a mistake. With the information that we've got, I feel the club have made a mistake. And look, we don't know what goes on behind closed doors. We don't know what goes on behind the scenes, do we? But it's a real shame for me. For him, I'm delighted he's got a great job at a really good club. I've got a lot of time for Chef Webb. I've always liked Sheffield Wednesday, even though Tony Norman dropped that ball at Hillsborough back in 1993. But yeah, good luck to him. It's nice to see him back in football with a CEO role, I think it is, isn't it? So he'll do well there, I'm sure. And I think there's a lot of similarities between Sunderland and Sheffield Wednesday too, in terms of the size of the club, the history, and all that sort of stuff. And I think I'll be watching on with interest to see how he does at Sheffield, because I think he'll do an exceptionally good job.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how it all pans out. I live in Sheffield, of course, and already had a few text messages from Wednesday fans asking about David Bruce and all that. So I've been singing his praises there. And You've just given me memories of the old fanzine as well. It's an easy one for Norman and all that. And actually, I'm sure there was a different commentary, because if anyone bought the SAFC 365 book, I think I did that piece in there, and there was a Clive Tilsley version of that, which was slightly different wording on the same day or something like that. But anyway, I could go down a rabbit hole and spend half an hour on that. But anyway, we need to move on, because also joining us today, we have a very good friend of the podcast. Because from the Sunderland Echo, we are delighted to have James Copley with us. Good morning, James.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
No, it's a pleasure, and thank you very much for taking your morning out on a bank holiday weekend. We really appreciate it, mate. But yeah, and yeah, well, actually, looking at what you've been up to lately, James, I know I've been reading a lot of your articles based around. They were talking about the David Bruce leaving, and it's seemingly, I mean, putting two and two together. I'm potentially wrong on that, but it seems like a lot of these stories have been coming out about issues with ticketing, and of course, it is that time of the year that people are trying to sort things out for next season, and direct debits are coming out and all of this sort of stuff, James. But you've had a couple of, you've spoken to a couple of people, you've reported on specific instances where it seems like the club are getting it slightly wrong on that front, aren't they?
Yeah, there's been a lot of people who have been in contact with the Sunderland Echo and with the Red and White Army supporter group as well. There are a range of issues across the board. It's not limited to one demographic. My sort of introduction to this was actually with a lot of fans in corporate. Now, people tend to hear the word corporate and they get disinterested immediately, but these fans who have moved into corporate, they tend to be people with mobility issues, elderly fans, or people who maybe have a little bit more money than us, but not a lot, who supported the club during League One. Now, what has happened, those corporate boxes have grown in price exponentially, and people can't afford them anymore because the price from League One to the Championship to the Premier League, it's doubled, in some cases tripled. People want to move back to general admission, and they are not being permitted, despite the fact that they've been, in some cases, season ticket holders for 30, 40 years. Elderly relatives have passed away who've moved up to corporate boxes or corporate areas, and the person accompanying them is not being allowed to move back to general admission. So that was how it all started, and then that sort of opened the floodgates for a raft of direct debit issues that I think we've all been aware of for a while, but we've not really been sure to the extent and the scale. And it's worth noting that there are a lot of Sunderland season ticket holders who are unaffected. But I think we're seeing this over the course of about a year or so now, that people are really frustrated. And, as a Sunderland fan, as a journalist for the Sunderland Echo, given where the club are at the moment, you don't necessarily want to write negative stories about the club, but we also have a duty to the city, to the area. And what I will say about the people I've interviewed and spoken to across corporate, across general admission, elderly supporters as well, and I've spoken to a lot of people whose accounts I haven't published because there's been too many. They don't want to talk negative about Sunderland either. They don't want to come to the Sunderland Echo. They feel it's a last resort. The communication continues to be a real issue. The ticket office seems understaffed. It's very hard to get a straight answer, and we're hearing a lot of problems. And it's sad to see. There's a wide cross section of elderly supporters that don't really feel listened to. I mean, the club do a great job on offering over 85s a free season ticket, if they've been a season ticket holder for 3 years now. I think that's good, but generally, in terms of actually helping older people in the ground, the club can fall behind in certain aspects as well. And I'm hearing troubling stories about Sunderland fans with disabilities and stuff like that, and it's not great. It's not a good look. As I say, there are many people who are unaffected and who might sort of question why we are covering this. But I mean, when it affects you, the emotion of it is really hard to deal with sometimes. These are season ticket holders for long periods of time. In some cases, elderly women who worked at Roker Park back in the day. The emotional connection they have with this football club, it is their lives. It's everything that they've done, and supporters in a lot of cases feel really, really left behind. And I think that nobody expects Sunderland to be perfect, but I think the communication is such a real issue, because you email, you get told to ring. You ring, you get told to email. You go on Ask SAFC, the replies stop coming. There's people go to and from the ticket office all the time. And I'm not criticising the staff in the ticket office. I think there should be more of them. people are often trying to get in with in touch with Chris Waters, the Sunderland liaison officer, and they're coming up against a brick wall. And again, that's not a criticism of Chris. I really like Chris as a person.
Yeah.
He does a great job, but there needs to be 2 or 3 more of him, in my opinion. Maybe even more bodies. And I think that's the real issue, is that when you outsource ticketing and stuff like that, it feels like the ticket office was maybe brought back as a bit of a red herring, really. And it's not fit for purpose at the moment. That's what I'm hearing. So it's a great shame, because I think the club have made great strides across the pitch, on the off-field stuff with the structures, the sport directorship. It's been run like a modern football club. The recruitment has been very good, but we can't afford a return to the dark days of the Black Cat Bar debacle. The fans need to be at the centre of everything. So it's a great shame. Just quickly on David Bruce, though, I'd never actually met David Bruce, but he asked us as a press pack, so me, Phil Smith, Nick Barnes, Dom Skur from the Northern Echo, and Scott Wilson from the Northern Echo, who wasn't there because he was covering Borough. He asked us to come and see him before. Well, he came and saw us before the Nottingham Forest game, which is very unusual, doesn't usually happen. And he actually presented us with handwritten cards thanking us for our coverage, which is most peculiar. That doesn't usually happen, especially not from a top executive. Nor do we expect it to happen all the time, to be brutally honest. But it was really nice. He was quite emotional to be leaving, and I thought that was a real touch of class, because he didn't have to do that. And I thought that was worth highlighting, that he's done a good job, and I think above all was a good bloke. And I think he is somebody Sunderland fans definitely thought was listening, and I know that because I've spoken to fan groups who saw their ideas implemented because they told them to David Bruce, and David Bruce wasn't too proud to take an idea from a Sunderland fan on board. And I think that's why it was such a roaring success in terms of how supporters viewed him. Sadly, that hasn't translated towards sort of the next stage and evolution of Sunderland's Premier League journey. How that looks going forward, I don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of role change, isn't there? I don't think anybody would begrudge Sunderland trying to progress at all. We want Sunderland to become a Premier League animal, but does that come with a cost? Do you need to sort of bear fans in mind during that? I think you do, and I think David Bruce was sort of the conscience of Sunderland in that boardroom, perhaps. And I'm interested to see where it goes from here, because I think there are issues that certainly need sorting out. I've got on for a bit there, but it's quite a complex subject, as you can understand.
No, well, that's why I raised it just at the beginning before we get into the game, because I think this is important. And we talked on the Q&A last week about the interim CEO's interview, which I had slight concerns about. But I mean, just very quickly, just to kind of sum it up, because you're saying that it is negative, but we've got to distinguish. We've got to have that split, haven't we, James, between saying, look, on the pitch, it's been a fantastic season, and off the pitch, we are doing some very good things. But it has to be highlighted if fans are getting the wrong end of the stick from the club in terms of, that they're on the wrong side of decisions, and trying to right wrongs is important when fans, aren't being treated as they should. If you consider the context of where we are now and where we've come from in those years in League One, and those people were there and stuck by the club should do the same.
Yeah, and I don't think this is going to happen again to Sunderland, but we know how quickly you can move through to divisions either way. You can look around the AFL, look at Luton Town, look at Leicester City, who won the Premier League and won the FA Cup and won the Community Shield and had a couple of seasons in Europe, and suddenly you find yourself in the third tier. I am not pretentious when it comes to Sunderland fans or new Sunderland fans. I think it's brilliant that we've got a season ticket waiting list. I think it's brilliant that the stadium's full. I don't begrudge anybody coming back or who didn't come for whatever reason. That's fair play. That's your decision. However, you do really need to look after the fans that were there in League One, because if it happens again, they'll be the ones propping the club up. And if we're honest, it was that 30,000 in League One that meant Sunderland didn't die, that meant Stuart Donald and Charlie Method were able to cling on financially, because that was the revenue that was coming through the door at the time, because you didn't have Premier League money, you didn't have TV money. You didn't have selling a player every summer for 20, 30 million pound. It was the fans that kept the club alive. And increasingly what I'm seeing is a lot of these people who've been there since the League One days feel like they're marginalised and left behind. And as I'll stress, you may have seen stories from the Sunderland Echo regarding corporate boxes, but there are others as well across the ground, 76 yards, general admission, the Jimmy Montgomery suite, everything from direct debit failures to trouble moving seats. I've heard cases of fans being asked to pay a premium and their discount being lost, their loyalty discount being lost just because they want to move seats. My friend Ken, he was or is part of a family of 5. They had 5 seats. They checked their direct debit last season. Only 3 of them had came out. Sunderland already sold the 2 other seats, so they had to move. And then he got talking to the couple who ended up with 2 of his old seats just by sort of chance, and got chatting to them and all of that sort of stuff. Anyway, as it transpires, the couple wanted to move this season, but then Ken had to pay 20 quid a head to move back into his old seats that he should never have lost in the first place. And obviously over a family of 5, that's 100 quid. You know, this is a working class club, a working class area. Ken's been there, you know, since the League One days. I think he's been a season ticket holder for something like 15, 20 years, maybe he's even more. So yeah, I mean, they may seem like small issues when you compare them with, you know, the recruitment side and being in the Premier League and managerial questions and all this sort of stuff, tactical questions. But this is, you know, for me, what really matters to a football club. And you have to balance that. What is Sunderland as an institution? Is it just a money-making machine, or do we actually care about fans? And, you know, you mentioned Tom Burwell. I listened to his interview. Obviously, Phil Smith spoke to him for the Sunderland Echo as well. You know, he had a lot of good to say. There were some things that did concern me as well. He's due to meet with the Red and White Army supporter group now. Very interested to read the minutes or what happens after that, because I think there are serious questions that need answering in terms of some of the decisions that the club are making. And as I'll stress again, I have no issue with this club wanting to make money and be the best that it can be, but you can't do that by annoying your loyalist supporters. It just shouldn't work like that. And a lot of people will come to me and they'll say, well, yes, this is just a reality of the Premier League and modern day football, but it doesn't have to be. You can still look after people and make money. I don't understand why it needs to be an either or exercise. You can have good systems in place and look after fans, and you can still make money, because ultimately, if this club and this ship is pointing in the right direction and people feel connected and looked after, they'll spend the money anyway. They'll spend it on shirts, they'll spend it on bricks, they'll spend it. People are queuing up to spend the money on Sunderland at the moment, but you've still got to look after people, and I think that's important.
Yeah, well said, James. It'll be interesting to see how all that plays out during the summer. Hopefully, the club get a grip on that and sort people out and help them along. But let's get back to the game. Of course, Sunderland, as I said, drew 1s each away to Wolves, Martin. As I said, I'm hoping you two help me kind of with how I feel about the game, because you know, it's one of them where it's based on the current positions in the table. We talked about it beforehand. Would Wolves be down and out? Would they be motivated for the game? Do the shackles off? Have they got a bit of freedom? But you're still thinking, well, you know, they've won 3 and 34. I think it was 3 and 17 at home. You tend to want to win. You get yourself in a good position. I don't know. So is there a frustration there, or with the way it all played out with that long under 10 men, which we'll go into? Are you thinking, yeah, actually, we won a point there?
It's a strange one, isn't it? Because, you know, on one side, Wolves have done pretty well at home recently. I think they beat Liverpool, didn't they? They beat Aston Villa at home. So they haven't been too shabby at home over the past, you know, couple of months. So you know it's going to be a relatively hard game, but, you know, they are relegated. They are down to one of the poorer teams in the league this season. So you should be looking to get all 3 points. I was really interested to see what the reaction would be and how we'd respond to the Forest game, because, you know, we've covered the Forest game, of course, but, you know, we were diabolical for 20 minutes in that Forest game. And I was really interested to see how we bounced back and how the team bounced back. And I thought we were really good until the 24th minute or whenever it was. I thought we looked in control. We were playing the ball around well. We looked really sharp. And that was, you know, the concern I had against Forest. At the start of the game, we looked sloppy. And the ball was bobbling about. We were taking 2 or 3 touches to get it under control. Yesterday against Wolves, I thought we started really well. We looked at it. We looked really focused and composed. The passing was sharp. And I thought we were going to win this. And you know, we obviously get a goal and go in front. The big moment of the game happens, which we'll I'm sure we'll all delve into and comment on different hairstyles and all that sort of stuff. But that changes it completely. So look at the end of it. I think to go away in the Premier League to play for that long with 10 men, a point's a decent point. Could we have been a bit more adventurous in the second half? I think we probably could have done. I think we were poor for the first 20 minutes of the second half. But all said and done, I'm relatively happy with the point. I think that mathematical safety, it's a nice thing to get. As James said earlier, I don't think we were ever under any serious threat of relegation at all this season. I don't think we've been below, 14th place all season. So, we were never in that conversation, really. But, get a point, keep the points sort of ticking over. And I just hope we get another win this season. We've got 3 hard games left, really tough games left. And I think that game yesterday was our best chance to get 3 points out of the remaining 4 games that we had. So perhaps it's a bit of a missed opportunity, but the way that the game went, I think it's not a bad point all told.
Yeah, and don't worry, mate. I've got all my Gabby Logan one-liners all lined up for
I
when we
wouldn't
get
expect
onto that.
anything less.
For when we get onto that incident. But James, just backtrack a second just to the start of the game, because if we look at the team sheet that Labris put out, Ronaldo and Talby came in for Diarra and Rigg. And they seem to go back to a shape, and actually and you might be able to tell me he did that before, but my memory goes straight back to when the team sheet came out for the game at Anfield, where Hume was out on the right-hand side of midfield, and we all kind of were scratching our heads what he was doing. He seemed to go back to that, and it almost like the Brits seemed to go back to basics after that Forest defeat. Do you think it was deserved that Diarra and Rigg came out, or do you think they were just casualties in the fact that Labris wanted to go back to that kind of tried and tested formation and be a bit more solid with Hume on that right-hand side?
I think Rigg probably a little bit more unlucky than Diarra. I didn't really have a problem with Labris making changes. I do think it's I think it's a sort of a case of him giving you something but taking away, because obviously we wanted to see Talby start. We wanted to see him start in his natural position. He does that, but then he puts Hume at right mid. Now, I don't necessarily have a problem with that for big games, because I think he offers you a bit of tactical flexibility and versatility, and obviously he's very strong defensively. But against Wolves away from home, I know he's a little bit cautious, because when he's gone for it this season, it sort of backfired. The other thing to mention, I guess, is personnel as well. But I would have been tempted to keep Chris Rigg in there. I don't think Habib Diarra can have too many complaints. But I think what we have to say is, up until the 24th minute, I think it was going to work fine. And I think Sunderland would have won that game comfortably, to be honest. And with Hume on the right and Talby on the left. So I didn't really have too many complaints with the decisions. I think he probably had to do something after losing 5-0 to Nottingham Forest. But I have really mixed emotions about the game, because obviously we'll come to the sending off. But these past 3 have felt like a little bit of a missed opportunity for me, because you have that chance to win it against Aston Villa. You end up losing. I'm convinced if we win that game against Aston Villa, you don't lose 5-0 to Nottingham Forest. Not saying we would have won that as well, but there's a bit of momentum, a bit of belief. And you've come away from 3 games with only 1 point, and you would have expected at least 3 in there. Obviously, there's mitigation with the Wolves game. I was quite proud of the defensive shape and display. And I actually thought Labris in the second half as well, the substitutions were fairly attacking. I think he wanted to go and win the game. But it's just so hard when you're playing from the 24th minute with 10 men. And I think Martin's right to point out that Wolves have actually improved at home, because they got a draw against Arsenal, who could win the Premier League and the Champions League not so long ago. So it is a little bit of a tougher place to go. Rob Edwards has sort of turned them around a little bit after a disastrous start, but it does feel like an opportunity missed, because the table is so tight, and had we won that game, I mean, we're still right in the mix, to be honest, with 3 games to go. But had we
unbelievably,
had we have won that game, then you're looking at the last 3 and you're thinking, we could really do it, and we still might be able to. Who knows? But it's going to be extremely tough. But yeah, very, very, very mixed emotions. And I think the other thing as well that I would highlight is that Sunderland from set pieces. I mean, that's 3 in 2 games from corners, a mixture of short and direct. Obviously, Hume at the back post doesn't appear to be working, and I feel I've felt, particularly against Forest and Wolves, that teams have worked us out to a degree, attacking set pieces against us. I think they've really looked at Sunderland and thought, actually, if you put the ball into an area here, there's a fair chance you're going to get an opportunity on goal, and that does concern me a little bit, because the start of the season we were very good at defending set pieces, but it's just slipped a little now.
Yeah, we'll definitely come back onto that. But just quickly on the lineup, Martin, I wanted to actually just highlight a couple of players for you to maybe comment on, because there's Hertrauder and Eliza Mayenda, who I wanted to just mention because we won't mention them again. It seems like in games like this where, you potentially want to shore things up or whatever, Hertrauder just doesn't seem to be an option either for the starting 11 to make changes or coming off the bench for any reason for reshuffles. Eliza Mayenda, at his age, he's not getting the minutes that I'm sure he would want, and I'm sure the club want him to get either. So there's two situations there that I guess Hertrauder might not wear a red and white strip again if he doesn't get on in the last few games. And Mayenda's going to be a puzzle for next season, isn't he?
Yeah, I think there's two different situations there, isn't there? I think Hertrauder, it's clear that he's not going to be here next season. So the Bristol's obviously given minutes to players who are going to be here or more likely to be here. And it's a shame because I think he's a really good player. I think we haven't seen the best of him at all. He hasn't been able to nail down a regular position. He's played in a number of positions, hasn't he? He's played right back, he's played in the centre of defence when he played with the back five, he's played in midfield. But he's never really been able to command a regular starting position. But it's ironic, isn't it? I think he probably had his best game for the club away in Newcastle, and he hasn't played since. So it is a bit of a strange one when you got a bloody Dutch international sat on the bench and we're not giving him any minutes at all. Mayenda is a bit of a puzzle because he's got such potential and such ability. And, we've seen it. We've seen it for the second half of last season, especially. We saw it in spades, didn't we? And my mind does go back to that game at West Ham where Mayenda started and he was just not in the game at all. He wasn't tracking back. He wasn't doing anything. He just looked lost. And I don't know if then the Bristol's kind of thought he's not ready for the Premier League. He's not ready to do what we need him to do at this level. So he's another one I wouldn't be surprised to see leave in the summer, but I think we might see him leave temporarily. So I think he's somebody who needs a loan. He needs to go out and play regularly. He's of the age where sitting on the bench is not going to do him any good, especially if he's not getting any game time from the bench. And look, if we somehow end up in Europe, I think that changes the conversation, doesn't it? Because you're going to need a bigger squad. There's going to be more opportunities to play. But it is. I have been surprised at the lack of opportunities, even like yesterday, because you see Mayenda, and yes, you can see where he needs to improve, and he's very raw on occasion. But he can pick the ball up from deep, drive with speed and pace, and go past people, and he's got a goal in him. And a game yesterday where it's getting a little bit end-to-end, it's getting a little bit sort of pulled and pushed in all directions, you kind of think he would be a perfect player to bring on just to cause a little bit of havoc in that last 10 minutes if you want to go and win it. So it has been a bit of a surprise, hasn't it, to see the lack of football he's been given. And it's it'll be interesting to watch over the summer what happens to him.
Yeah. Well, look, before we get into the incidents that everybody's waiting for us to talk about, I think we'll take a quick break. So we'll be back very soon.
Pepsi Prebiotic Cola in original and cherry vanilla. That Pepsi taste you love with just 30 calories and no artificial sweeteners. Pepsi Prebiotic Cola. Unbelievably Pepsi.
Now at McDonald's, a McDouble is $2.50, so you can get your gym gains on, or just get lunch for only $2.50. Get more value on the under $3 menu.
Limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher for delivery.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. You know those friends who support your preference for podcasts over music on road trips? That's the energy State Farm brings to insurance. With over 19,000 local agents, they help you find the coverage that fits your needs, so you can spend less time worrying about insurance and more time enjoying the ride. Download the State Farm app or go online at statefarm.com. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
And welcome back to Haway The Podcast. And we're just about to get into the meat of this game because I think, going into the start of the game, Wolves started kind of on the front foot, but we shifted momentum quite quickly. And then on around 16 minutes, James, Brian Brobby had a chance, and it stemmed from, I think, Lefebvre moving into this central role because he read a nod down. He kind of read where the ball was going to end up, and he picked the ball up. And then he had Siddiqui running beyond him. And this is the combination. I think if you have Lefebvre with a ball in the middle of the park and you have players running beyond him, I mean, that's the ideal scenario, isn't it, for Lefebvre? And he played a third to Siddiqui, Siddiqui threw to Brobby, and Brobby kind of deflected it over. But just at the start of that move, this Lefebvre getting into that central position, all of the changes that Lebris made, it was almost to engineer this scenario, wasn't it?
I think so, and I think it's really important for Brian Brobby actually that we get players in and around him. I don't think it's happened enough at times. He's so good with his hold-up play. He can obviously finish as well, but he's so strong. And time seems to sort of stand still when he gets the ball in forward areas, and he's begging, dying for players to get in and around him at times this season, and sometimes it hasn't happened. So I think playing Lefebvre centrally, it's what we've all wanted to see. He's Sunderland's highest goal contributor this season. I think he's probably on balance been Sunderland's best player, barring maybe Xhaka, I would say, in terms of consistency. I think his numbers would back that up. So I was pleased to see that move happen. Noah Siddiqui as well has had such a good introductory season to the Premier League, and we all think he's worth like 50, 60, 70 million pound, and rightly so. But I think, and that's what was pleasing actually, in this move that you mentioned, he got the ball spot on, and I think that's the one criticism you can have of Noah Siddiqui's game, is that sometimes the final ball and a little bit of decision making does let him down. I would throw that at Habib Diarra as well, who obviously hasn't been as good as Siddiqui. But if they can nail that, if they can start to improve that, they can get runners off Robbie and they can get that final ball nailed. I think that's quite exciting, really, because these are really, really talented players. And I mean, Enzo Lefebvre, we spoke about me and Phil on the Raw podcast last week, and he's what a marvellous footballer. I mean, to go back to the Villa game, the pass for Wilson Isado's goal takes 5 or 6 Villa men out of it. Some of the stuff he does with the footballer's touches, I actually think what's really underrated about him is his defensive work. I thought against Wolves he was really good at picking people's pocket from behind and sort of swiping the ball. How we got him in the Championship, I don't know. And honestly, I know we've seen some great midfielders at Sunderland over the years, and in terms of his legacy, he's probably not quite there yet in terms of some of the greats, but in terms of like raw technical ability, I haven't seen many better. I think you'd obviously have to throw Xhaka in, Stefan Schwartz. I always loved Jan Kirchhoff. You guys would probably be able to go a little bit further back in terms of technicality. Maybe he's a Don Hutchinson, maybe he's a Don Hutchinson or something like that. But I just think in terms of like a modern footballer, he's just ability-wise one of the best we've ever seen. He's amazing.
Yeah, well, I was thinking more, Cullen or Doyle, Martin. I don't know about you.
A lot of people speak about Colin Todd, don't they, back in the day? And I get the same impression with Enzo. Like, it's just so technically good.
Oh, I'm not that old, James. I didn't say Colin Todd. But anyway, swiftly moving on, Martin.
I'll tell you what, just Chris, it's very rare you pass up an opportunity to mention Paul Bracewell. We've just done it there.
I know. Well, the first name I came to my head was Andy Melville, but I'm not sure I could have gotten it away on the technical aspect. But anyway, from the resulting corner, Martin, 17 minutes, we went ahead, and great corner by Xhaka, and you saw the zonal marking by Wolves. And actually, their zonal marking meant that they just watched Michele nod home from about 6 yards out for his third of the season. It was about as simple as it gets, but it does make you wonder, when Xhaka can put a ball in like that, and we've got Michele, Ballard, Alderete, you can maybe throw Brobby in there, it makes you wonder why we haven't scored more goals from corners, or at the very least, looked more dangerous from them.
Yeah, no, it's been strange, hasn't it? And this part of me kind of wonders whether we overcomplicate it a lot of the time, because if we've got good players from an aerial perspective in the box, and we can swing corners in like that, why do we do more often? Why do we just get the ball in and let people challenge for it? Because it can cause havoc. And we saw a string of games, didn't we, where we were trying this near post corner, and it was either getting headed away by the first man, or it wasn't actually even going past the near post. It was going side netting. And we were trying this routine, and it's going, it's got to be really spectacular that to come off. And I don't know whether it's people overcomplicating things, people trying to be a bit too clever on occasion. But, again, it's going to sound really old. Just lump it in, fight for it, and see what happens. But that was exactly the same situation as we scored. There's a beautiful ball in, and Jack has got that, hasn't he? He's got that ability to just really whip a good ball in. Mukiele's dangerous. He's got a couple of goals recently, hasn't he? And it was a really well-deserved goal because I thought we were on top at that point of the game. I thought we played really well up to that point.
Yeah, and for a while, James, actually, we've had some questions sent into the Q&A recently about potentially getting a set-piece coach, and you always see them now on the sidelines as much as the managers now, the set-piece coaches, and people are asking if we need one. So, do you think we do need one because of the stats behind, how dangerous we've been? Or do you think sometimes it's just a case of putting a quality ball into the box and then wanting to win the ball like Xhaka and Michele did?
I do have mixed feelings because I tend to sort of agree with Martin in a sense that just put a quality delivery in and attack the football and surely you stand yourselves in good set, especially when a team's zonal marking as well. I always think that's definitely an in when they're as poor as Wolves. But the other side of me thinks, the Premier League, such a strong league, such massive amounts of money, marginal gains, all of that sort of stuff that you might need to specialise. We've seen that across like sport in general, haven't we? That you need specialist coaches. It wasn't that long ago that goalkeeping coaches wasn't even a thing, and obviously that was a specialist position, and set pieces a specialist point in the game. So I think Sunderland definitely need to work at it. But you're right to point out, Chris, that Sunderland have some really good aerial threats. Like Mukwele is a massive aerial threat. Dan Ballard was still on the pitch. Alderete as well. So when you've got Xhaka who can fire in a ball and Lefebvre can fire in a ball as well, you would like to see us make the most of it more often. But I guess good that they've got the confidence back and they've shown that they can score from a set piece again, because I think it'd been a little while, hadn't it? But yeah, definitely positive, and it's just a shame because I think Son probably would have pushed on, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, 7 minutes later, it all kind of changed. The game swung again because it started with Wolves sucking us in for the press, and then the goalkeeper played it out long. And actually, I was looking at this, and if you look at our defensive shape, it's actually awful. I mean, Alderete is standing 10 yards directly ahead of Ballard, Martin, and he's lost under the ball. And actually, he loses his man. And if the ball's flicked on, Wolves are actually through on goal. But it's actually in the tussle with Ballard and the Wolves striker, Arakadare. And, he goes down and then play goes on. It goes back to VAR, and they've checked and then judged that Ballard has pulled his hair, which then, of course, results in a sending off. And there's been reactions both ways in terms of saying, well, he did and he should have been sent off. And there's actually been debates now about the rule. So I'll leave it to you, Martin, to unpick first.
Very kind. Yeah, I don't know how on earth football's got itself into this position where touching somebody's braid is violent conduct in the red card. Like it's nonsensical. So you can argue about it's not even a rule, it's guidance that the referees have been given recently. So there's actually not a rule in football that says if you pull somebody's hair, you get sent off. It's guidance that the PG blah, 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 whatever they're called, have been issued to referees. Yeah. And you look at the inconsistency of it as well. Obviously, we saw, was it Michael Keane got sent off for Everton earlier in the season for something similar. The Man U lad, was Martinez, got sent off for pulling Dominic Calvert-Lewin's man bun. And then Calvert-Lewin pulls the Chelsea guy against in the semi-final, so to speak, and he doesn't get sent off. The VAR look at it and say, oh no, that's fine. There was one against Brentford versus Fulham where the Brentford player pulls the Fulham fella's hair, and the VAR look at it and say that's not worthy of a red card. And it cannot be. it cannot be if you touch a player's long hair, right? Because if you've got short hair and you touch a player's hair, that's not a red card. So you've actually got an advantage if you've got long. We might as well issue a mandate to all of our players that over the summer, they've got to grow their hair. Because it literally gives you an advantage if you've got players with long hair. Because Ballard's gone up. He's not looking at the fella's hair. He's looking at the ball. He puts his arm up, as the defender's got to win the header. And he's got a touch on his bloody braid. The lad's head goes forward. If he's getting pulled by the braid, he's going to go back. So he's touched his hair. We are sending players off in the first half of Premier League games for touching somebody's hair. It's, you get the same punishment for going in 2-footed above the knee as you do for touching somebody's braid. Like, tell me how we've got to this point in football where touching somebody's braid is violent conduct. I can understand it, right? If you've got somebody with really long hair going through on goal and the defender yanks him back, fine, that's a sending off. It's a professional foul. That's violent conduct. Absolutely fine. But going up for a header, competing for a header, and somebody's touching, seriously, man, it's absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
Absolute nonsense.
We'll bring you in on it, James, because, I've been watching it backwards in slow motion and going frame by frame this morning on it and trying to look when actually he made contact with his hair. And actually, if you look frame by frame, just before the ball makes contact, he's actually not got any of his hair. And then I think that the striker's momentum swings one way and his hair goes that way. And then he kind of grabs again and then he gets some of the hair. And it is strange when you look at this, because it seems like when with the hair pulls or contact with the hair, it seems like a load of emotion comes into it, where, there is this thing about, you can't touch people's hair. Because if you look in the Man City Arsenal game the other week, Gabriel basically headbutted Haaland, and the referee put an element of common sense on it and said, look, they're both at it. I'm just going to give them both yellow cards, even though, by the letter of the law, he should have probably been sent off. Now, in this case, there's a difference between someone going up behind someone and yanking him back by his hair, maybe off the ball or whatever, than there is in the middle of a challenge when the centre-half is clearly looking at the ball and has no intention, really, on doing what I think the officials thought he did in this instance.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things to this. I think the way the game's being refereed at the moment, and there's clearly been a directive, I don't think Ballard can have too many complaints in terms of the way the current climate is what I'm saying. I think what we've seen before, obviously there's been a couple missed this season as well, but generally, if you have a handful of someone's hair, you're going to get sent off. Now, I'm not saying that's right, and I'm not saying the rule is correct. I think in football, we have a real problem that we don't take into account intent or mitigation, which is just silly to me. You look at International Rugby Union and Rugby Union, and they judge each decision on intent and mitigation. Are there mitigating circumstances which meant that Dan Ballard has done this? Yes, because he's clearly gone to get the shirt. He's ended up with a fistful of the hair. As you say, Martin, if you freeze frame it, he's not even looking at the braid. So he's sort of unaware. He's grabbed it by accident, which I think should be a factor. It isn't a factor, and the laws and the rules and the directives means that he has to go. And by that sort of logic, it's the correct decision if you're doing things by the book. But the rule and the way it's been interpreted and applied in this directive is quite clearly the problem, because why should Dan Ballard now miss the rest of the season for essentially what was a coming together? And it's not violent conduct at all. It's a coming together, and it's an accident. Some common sense needs to be applied. And yes, if you want to discourage people from pulling people's hair, which I think we should in football, but then maybe just have it as a yellow card, because it's quite clearly a little bit of an accident. I thought Lebris was spot on in what he said after. He was very diplomatic, and he said, look, we understand that it's been given and it's the right call in terms of how it's been refereed at the moment, but we need to have a conversation because it's silly, isn't it, really? And it's not what anybody wants to say. And I think the Wolves fans were even saying that it was a joke in the stadium, weren't they? They were chanting against VAR and all of that sort of stuff. And, the spectacle of that game was ruined, essentially, wasn't it? By that red card. It doesn't help anybody. I feel like we're over refereeing the game now. It's just weird and it's just bizarre, and I don't think this is what we had in mind when we wanted technological help in football, and it just seems that we're getting further and further away from what actually made the game good. Because I think Wayne Rooney, Joe Hart on Match of the Day I watched last night, and they played the game, and they said that this is a bit silly, a bit daft. That there's clearly no intent there. These coming together has happened, and I think that's really lacking is actual football expertise from people who have played the game, which you do get to a degree in rugby union as well. I'm not saying we should do it exactly the way rugby union does, but I just can't believe that when you are alleging that somebody has partaken in violent conduct, that you do not take intent or mitigation into that. Like, that doesn't make sense. So you've judged somebody to be violent in their conduct, but you're not taking intent into that. But surely, by definition, if you are violent in your conduct, that comes with intent. So, but you won't take intent into the equation. It just, for me, doesn't make sense. And you could break somebody's leg and not mean to, but that's still violent conduct and a red card. So, just make it make sense. Really, and I'm no doubt Sunderland would have won that game as well. So it's definitely cost us. It's puzzling. It's perplexing.
Yeah, Martin, just quickly, James says there, make it make sense. How do we do that? I mean, because I know there's advice, I think, in the women's game in terms of how they should wear their hair, because to avoid it getting caught, or loose hair can just generally be a hazard. But in the men's game, I mean, is it exactly the same? Should the same advice be put across? I mean, do then we have to say, well, hair needs to be up, full stop? What do we do about it?
Well, use a modicum of common sense, I would suggest. Like, again, this is the same as an elbow, right? If a centre half and a centre forward go for a header, you often see elbows go into faces, and it's not an elbow as a violent act. It's an elbow hitting somebody. Now, that's never going to get blown. You're never going to get sent off for a defender going up and an elbow catching a forward in the face if it's not got that motion to it. So the same has got to apply here. If you're going up for a header and you violently pull somebody's bloody hair down, then yes, that's violent conduct. If you've got a sort of glancing little pull, if you're not looking, if you're staring at his bloody hair and you pull it back, then yes, I can understand why that would be a red card. I say if a winger's flying down the wing and the fullback grabs his long hair to pull him back and stops him, of course that deserves punishment. You're going to get forwards now growing the hair to actually win an advantage against defenders. If I was playing professionally, I would grow my hair long. Well, if I could. I can't. If I could, I would grow my hair long. And I would be going, because this is the thing as well, right? If he hadn't gone down and holding his hair and going, pull my hair, the VAR don't look at it. So we're opening the door here for forwards to just go, he's pulled my hair. And in the current climate, if there's a touch on his hair, the referees are sending him off. So we've got to apply common sense to it. We've got handball where, I'm sure we might come on to it later on. There was a handball shout in the very last moments of the game, and it was a handball. Now, whether it's a handball enough to give a penalty or not, in the Champions League it would be, in the Premier League it's not. But there's an interpretation of whether it's a deliberate act and it's going to stop something, right? Everything else in football, we look at through, or most things in football, which the referees look at with some common sense. Like, there was a Wolves tackle on the Spurs player last weekend, and it could have been a red card, but kind of, well, look, he's going for the ball, he slipped a little bit before he's going in. Yes, he's caught him. That's a yellow card. You cannot tell me that little hair braid pull deserves not only sending the player off from the field to reduce the team from 10 men, he's going to get a 3-match ban, So that's his season done with. You cannot tell me that sort of offence warrants that punishment. You cannot tell me that. You maybe James has talked about rugby union. I watch a lot of rugby league. In rugby league, the referee will put a player on report during the game if he sees something that's a bit not too sure about. Put him on report. The disciplinary committee will look at him Monday. You might get a game ban. You might get a fine, whatever it is, or it might say, well, if you do that 3 times in the season, you're going to get a ban. There's got to be something like that to review it, so you're not losing the game. Because if we'd needed 3 points yesterday to stay up, that decision could have catastrophic consequences for a football club. And you've got to manage the game more sensibly. So the answer to the question is it's using some common sense. Now I don't know why they've gone nuts about hair pulling. Like what's happened? Is like Howard Webb got hair implants now or something. He's got to Turkey to get some bloody hair extensions because he seems to be protecting hair. And I tell you what, like refereeing's in such a shit state in this country. They're bothered about hair. Like that sort doesn't make sense. Why aren't they concentrating on all of the other things that they aren't getting right, rather than introducing something else that is like ridiculous? It's absolutely ridiculous.
It's mad that we're having this conversation, but I'm reliably informed by a few Sunderland supporting American friends of mine that in the NFL, in pursuit of a tackle, if your hair or your braid is over your shirt, then it becomes fair game. Within reason. I know the NFL's not football, but it's bizarre that we have to have these rules in sport, and that we are looking at adopting something from another sport to mitigate for the fact that people have long hair now. It's very strange, and I think Martin's right. Like, why are we sort of prioritizing these issues when there are bigger issues in the game? I mean, had that gone unpunished, I'm not sure Wolves fans would have been sort of all over social media saying that Ballard needed to be sent off. I mean, some of them may well have, because that's just the tribal nature of football, but I don't think if you showed that to most Premier League fans that they're going to be too bothered about it. And it has been made an issue, hasn't it? I mean, there are obvious. I mean, the irony is that Dominic Calvert-Lewin one on Cucurella, that probably is a hair pull, because there's actually daylight between them, and he's yanked his hair back. But this is just such a coming together, and not even people who have played the sport, but anybody who's watched the sport just knows that those are two physical players who've gone for the ball, and Ballard, unfortunately, in trying to go for the shirt, has ended up with some hair. He's actually let go of it pretty quickly as well, by the way. And these things always look worse when they're slowed down. It happens so fast. It's not a yank. It's just sort of a grab, really, a feel. He's felt his braids a little bit, and that's it. It's yeah.
His hand's there to push him, not to pull him.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's right. And it says the guidance is any clear grabbing and pulling of an opponent's hair is treated as violent conduct. And again, look, that's words are open to interpretation, right? But I don't see that as being grabbing and pulling.
Yeah.
It doesn't say grabbing or pulling. It says grabbing and pulling. Right? So you've got that bit. You know what I want to see, right? I want to see us next week all come out in long flowing wigs. I want to see the Sunderland team. I want to see Brian Brobby in a big blonde wig.
Got like Gaza in his Ginola wig.
Well, we've gone the other way, haven't we? We've got Noah Siddiqui's skinhead era and Habib Diarra's skinhead era.
Yeah. Well, I just wished Gav was on at the same time talking about this, because between Martin and Gav, we would have had Haway The Podcast's very own Right Said Fred commenting on hair pulling, which which would have been fun. But anyway, moving on. I'll come to you, James, because look, I think we still look comfortable with 10 men before half time going into the break. But then Wolves came out a little bit on the front foot, and then 10 minutes into the second half, they get the equaliser. And it comes from a corner, James, very similar, really, when you put them side by side with our opening goal. Cross to the back post, and Santiago Bueno nods home to score his 4th goal of the season from close range. He ends, and then he's actually Wolves' top scorer on 4, by the way. But there's a lot to unpack, because Siddiqui goes down at the front post. And then at the back post, I think you've already touched on, actually, James, but Bueno beats Alderete, Hume and Xhaka in the air to score. So it was all just a bit messy, wasn't it, James?
Yeah, I just think they've switched off. And as I say, I do feel like teams have identified that if you can get the ball at the back post, that Sunderland aren't necessarily strong. I think Trey Hume's obviously got a lot of strengths as a football player, but obviously defending high set pieces, corners and free kicks whipped in probably isn't his strength. That's saying Sunderland should do better. I get that Wolves have a numerical advantage, but I'd still back Sunderland in that scenario to get the ball away. I just think they need to take a little bit more responsibility. There clearly needs to be a little bit more clarity on what everybody's role is from set pieces. The Siddiqui getting pushed at, my personal opinion, that wasn't enough. I thought he went down a little bit soft, and I do struggle with that in the game that, perhaps players at times, and this is an accusation I would level just at Sunderland's players, but across the board, I find too often they're looking for a reason to get the set piece overturned rather than just go and defend it. I'm not pinning it all on Siddiqui because he probably can't get to the ball anyway, but maybe if as a collective we were more bothered about somebody getting a head on it and attacking the football rather than going down off the slightest push, then I think that would serve us well. Robin Roofs as well, could he perhaps come for it? I think it's harsh to blame him in full, but I feel like he's regressed slightly in the confidence that we had from him from set pieces. He doesn't seem to have come for the high ball under a corner for a little while, which is a shame. Obviously, he had that mistake against Forest, didn't he, playing out for the back with his feet. I just wonder if that's knocked him slightly. Still a really good goalkeeper who's had a really good season, but just think across the board on set pieces, defending particularly, was really, really dropped off. And I can't put my finger on why and how it changes, but I don't think you can just pin it on one player or one factor or even a set piece coach or even Labrise. I think it's a real collective effort, and I think you've got to have your mentality really right, really strong. I just don't feel like it's there at the moment in terms of like the willingness to just be backs to the wall and get the ball away. I really felt that at the start of the season. Games against Arsenal at home really spring to mind where we would I know we conceded 2 in that game, but we were just uber rock solid, and every defending set pieces became sort of an event. Attacking set pieces felt like an event, and we were really clear on what we wanted to do. And I feel like they've lost that a little bit at the moment.
Yeah. To bring you in on the goal, Martin, because we've commented on Siddiqui doing the odd thing like this. We've commented on Diarra, I think, earlier in the season off a corner, going down easily, looking for a free kick. So there's that aspect to it. And as James said, Robin Roofs, he was very busy pushing a player out the way. And then as the ball's coming in, immediately retreated back to his line, where actually you're thinking, can he just come and clear everyone out in that instance? And the other thing is, if you freeze the shot where the ball's just coming across, we're going man for man, and we've got Xhaka and Alderete as zonal marking in great positions, and we look fine. And then suddenly at the back post, it just all goes wrong, and Bueno wants it more than the Sunderland players. But yeah, with the players we've got, you'd think we should be defending better than that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what went wrong really, whether it was communication errors or what. But I with the Siddiqui thing, I would be really disappointed if we scored that goal and was disallowed for that. I don't think there was much in it at all. So I think you kind of just let that one go. I think it was a little bit different from the Diarra one. The Diarra one was the Brighton one, wasn't it? Where he stayed down trying to get the game stopped, and play went on and went along and scored, didn't it? Which was a little different. Like Siddiqui got back up.
Yeah, Diarra stayed down far too long, didn't he? In that passage,
ridiculous. Yeah, absolutely ridiculous.
Especially when you get up and you're okay to continue the rest of the game.
Well, that's exactly right. But look, I think Siddiqui maybe went down a little bit easy, but the ball was way over, so you kind of chancing your arm to see if the referee might buy it or not, and obviously didn't on this occasion. There's a couple of interesting points, isn't there? I think it's been commented on that Trey Hume's been maybe targeted a little bit aerially by teams over the past few weeks. We've conceded a lot of chances. And I think, if you look at the Forest first goal even last weekend, that was Trey Hume losing out on an aerial battle. He didn't even get off the ground, did he, for that one? And you kind of wonder how much truth is in that, because the more you look at it, you can see that Hume's been targeted, because he's actually not very good in the air. I would say it's his one weakness that he has in his game. And obviously he's got a natural weakness, I guess, with his height in that situation, but he seems to get caught into the flight of the ball a little bit, which is a concern. But when you've got Alderete and Xhaka in there as well, we should be defending that so much better. Robin Roofs is a really interesting one. I'm kind of almost glad he's having this little downturn in form, because it might make clubs who are looking at him go, maybe he needs another season. Maybe he just needs another season of playing football, because that's not a mistake. The Wolves goal isn't a mistake. Obviously, he did make a mistake or two against Forest. I thought actually he'd be disappointed in at least 3 of the goals against Forest. I think he could have done a lot better. But for the Wolves goal, it wasn't necessarily a mistake, but it's one of those, from what we've seen and what we know of Roofs, he could do better, because we've seen him come out and claim crosses and be really commanding and come out and just fly over people and clatter people. And he's been a little bit reluctant. Now, I don't know whether it's since he came back from injury and maybe he's not fully fit. But even that Bournemouth goal, he got caught out there, didn't he, with the ball coming over? So there's part of me is kind of going, okay, it's a little weakness that we've seen he can do. It's not a fundamental weakness in his game. It's a consistency issue. So I'm all right with that at this stage of the season, because it might give us a good chance of keeping him for the next year or two, rather than a Barcelona or Man City or Chelsea looking and go, we'll chuck 60 million for him now and we'll have him. So potentially that's good, but it's going to be interesting to see how he doesn't. It could be an instruction, couldn't it? It could be an instruction from the coaching staff to stay on your line and not come for those corners, because the likes of Alderete, Ballard when he's on the field, Xhaka should be able to win those headers and clear it. But if it is, I don't quite understand it. It was very similar to our goal in a lot of respects. Because you look at our goal and go, that's a really easy, straightforward goal. And I thought, for all of the hard work that we'd done to that point, we gave them a really, really easy route back into the game.
Yeah, and actually, just my last quick comment on Roofs, I felt actually he was too distracted by the player who was standing on him. He seemed to be more intent on pushing that guy out the way rather than just saying, I'm gonna get the ball coming in. But with about 20 minutes to go, James, there was a triple substitution from Lebris. Diarra came on for Siddiqui, Isidore came on for Brobbey, and Dennis Serkin came on for Ronaldo. And I actually just want to ask you quickly about Dennis Serkin, because he got on. And of course, he's still out of contract in the summer. So I just wondered, because we've got the Gachardo one who doesn't seem to be in the part of the plans for next season. Dennis Serkin's still getting on the pitch, and maybe it's just a case of Lebris thought that's the best option in that scenario. But do you still see him as a Sunderland player next season?
No, to be brutally honest, I don't. I think when he came in earlier on in the season, did he play against Leeds at the Stadium of Light? I remember speaking to him.
Yes, that was his first game, yeah.
Yeah, I remember speaking to him afterwards at the Stadium of Light, and I asked him, I was like, do you want to stay? And his response was non-committal, but his response was, I love Sunderland, but, there's things going on and we'll have to see. I actually thought his performances around that time, I remember writing a piece for the Sunderland Echo website on, he's worth a contract, because he's come in, he's played in the Premier League, he's still quite young. What is he, 23 or 24, something like that? I think if you were to buy a player of his caliber with his experience, double promotion winner, loves the club, has come through the leagues with Sunderland, understands what it means, a little bit injury prone if we're being honest, but I think at his height and at his pomp, playing to his full potential and regularly, I think he could absolutely be a Premier League left back. To sort of buy a player of that caliber with that experience would actually cost Sunderland a bit of money. So for me, at that point in the season, it was a little bit of a no-brainer, because he's young and he's still got time to be the understudy to Ronaldo for maybe a year or two, and then come back in. But since then, he hasn't really featured much, and I think it's telling with Lebris is that he will prefer Trey Hume at left back, won't he? He's done that recently. So for me, I disagree, because I think he should have perhaps played a little bit more. Ronaldo's been absolutely fantastic, but could Dennis Serkin have been coming on in games? I don't necessarily agree with the decision to let him go. I mean, the club have a track record on this. I didn't really necessarily agree with the not playing Dan Neil at the time and him not getting more minutes out. I was expecting to see him more, but the club have got a track record where they turn out to be right on these decisions. We saw it with Anthony Patterson, we saw it with Dan Neil. So they're probably making the right call with Dennis Serkin, but I just think for me, it's a shame we haven't seen him given a chance. I did feel that about some other players as well in the Sunderland squad, especially from the League One and Championship days. But I mean, ultimately, the problem he's had is Ronaldo Mandava as a Champions League and an international quality left back. Is it harsh on Serkin because he's not really had the chance? Obviously, he was injured as well, wasn't he, coming back into the Premier League season? So I don't see him being a Sunderland player now. I can't see him signing a contract. But I do think a top-level Championship club, or maybe even a lower-end Premier League club or a newly promoted club like a Coventry, or maybe even an Ipswich, I think they're going to get a really, really, really good player. And I'd be interested to see if he was to stay injury-free and get like 10, 15 games in the Premier League, how he would do, because I really rate him. I'm reminded of that goal he scored against Coventry at the Stadium of Light, marauding from his own half with a brilliant finish. I really like him, and I think nostalgia and feeling always plays a part in how you think of these players. I'm always really sort of reluctant to discard a player who's done something for us, and Dennis Cirkin absolutely has done a lot for us. So yeah, but for me, I think he leaves in the summer. But Sunderland's track record at recruitment recently is very good, and you would back them to find somebody better and push the team on, because that's what they've done so far.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a shame. I think if he had more confidence in himself in playing a full season, I think things could have been very different. But Martin, look, there was a couple of incidents after that. We actually had a couple of half chances. We were under pressure for periods, but it did play out and end up 1-1. And of course, we were looking for a response after that Forest game. So in terms of going down to 10 men and the game management that we had, I mean, do you think we saw a response?
Oh, I think we undoubtedly did. And again, it's such a hard game to really give a verdict on, isn't it? Because it changed absolutely and fundamentally with that sending off. So I think the real positive is that, as I said at the start, the opening period, I thought we looked really sharp and intense and focused and all that sort of stuff. And look, we can say, it would be nice to maybe go at them a bit more in the second half to try to get the win, to be a bit more adventurous and all that sort of stuff. But we know Lebris, and I think actually in the last couple of games he probably has tried to be a little bit more adventurous, and we conceded 9 goals in 2 games. So the reality is we've got to try to get back to what we're good at, and we kind of did that yesterday. So I think it's a decent point. You can kind of rattle out all the cliches, can't you? But a point away from home in the Premier League is always going to be a decent point. And I was just glad that we avoided defeat, because coming off the back of that 5-0, like, you don't know how the players are going to react here. And again, a Wolves team who've picked up some decent points at home in the last few months, if they got an early goal, who knows what happens to us? So I think you can say, look, yeah, there's bits of the game, bits of our play, tactically, all that sort of stuff. You can always look at and pick holes in after the game, can't you? After the fact, but I think we did all right. Certainly wasn't the one where you come out of really pissed off that we've played badly or anything like that. You go, oh, did all right. Again, we could have won. It's like we had the shot from Xhaka, which I thought you should have hit the target with from the edge of the box. We had the opportunity for Isidore over the top with Robin Roofs put him clean through, and he took a touch, and he didn't actually need to take a touch. He could have just gone straight through, couldn't he? So we had opportunities to get a second goal. We had the Dennis Cirkin penalty shout, as I've mentioned earlier. And, another day you get those balls bouncing the right side of the post, or Isidore decides to let the ball run through, or whatever, but I'm quite content, I would say, is how I feel about that point. Quite content, Chris.
Well, yeah, I mean, James, the psychology of the thing was all a bit odd, because the way I look at it, you look at the stats, actually, Wolves had more possession. They had twice as many shots, nearly 4 times as many shots on target. And just for Johnny, the XG says the game should have ended 2-1 to Wolves if you do the rounding. But actually, if you transport this game, James, to the start of the season, and you say that we go ahead, we get someone sent off after, before the half-hour mark, and then we go and get a point away from home against Wolves, people would probably be celebrating that, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe he's not now after Wolves' struggles, but yeah, I think had you presented that scenario to some fans at the beginning of the season, they would have taken that. And I think it's a point that you're going to come on to, isn't it? But it's interesting, this question of perception and how that's moved on as Sunderland's season has gone on, because I think a lot of fans, even with the red card, I've seen saying that we should have had enough to go and beat Wolves. I disagree. I think it's really hard to play in the Premier League with 10 men and win a game. The goal is frustrating. To concede from the corner like that is frustrating, but I think a point on balance, probably a fair result. But again, I'll stress, I've got no doubt that Sunderland would have gone on to win that game had they not had the man sent off, and I think probably comfortably as well. I didn't really see Wolves posing that much of a threat, and you mentioned the stats from the game as well, but they come from Sunderland having 10 men, don't they? And yet I still think there was enough in the game where Sunderland could have nicked it in the end. It's just, as I say, in terms of the league table, it's so frustrating because had we even picked up like a point against Villa, you know, we would be right up there. But you know, 3 from this little run of fixtures would have been absolutely fantastic, and yet it's still not quite over. So it's it's interesting, and 3 really tough games, really tough games coming up. But with this Sunderland side, I always seem to back us when the backs are against the wall, and who knows with quality opposition, maybe as we get back to a bit of what made us good in the first place. And when you think they're going to get beat, e.g. against Newcastle away, that you know, they pull a result out the bag, or Chelsea away, they seem to pull a result out the bag, Anfield away, pull a result out the bag. So it's hard to predict, isn't it? Because who could have predicted what's happened at the very start of the season, that Sunderland were effectively safe in the new year for me, never involved in a relegation battle. And what's the worst thing that's happened this season? We've lost, 3 games in a row and went out in the FA Cup against Port Vale. Losing 5-0 at Forest wasn't great, but other than that, I'm struggling really to think of bad things that have happened this season, which is a departure from the norm in the Premier League, to be honest.
Absolutely. I mean, Martin, that's the point, isn't it? The psychology of this season's so strange. We lose 4 of the first 20 games, which nobody would have predicted, but we've lost 8 of the last 15, or the 15 since then. And I think if you flip that the other way around, everybody would be cheering and everybody would be celebrating and everybody would be thinking this is unbelievable. But because it's with a negative second, it just people are asking questions that there wouldn't have been, even though the season would have been exactly the same, but flipped. It's just odd, isn't it? The psychology of the whole thing.
It is, but I guess it depends how you're looking at it. So if you're looking at this season as just a one start and end, then yeah, absolutely. You know, if we went away to Wolves in September, came away with a point with 10 men, we'd be all saying, "Oh, brilliant performance, brilliant point, great result, all that sort of stuff." We're having a different conversation now. And I think the people who have concerns about the current form, you know, some of the performances as well, are possibly looking with more of a longer term view next season, because we want to see, you always want to see consistency and gradual improvement, don't you? And I don't think you could say we've seen improvement from the first half of the season to the second half of the season. Now, there's a whole number of reasons for that, and a whole number of factors for that. I think you can look at, you know, the performance of Enzo Lefebvre, for example. In this, you know, as the season's gone on, he's got better and better and better. You know, Siddiqui, I think you could put in the same boat. I think he's grown and developed and progressed throughout the course of the season. We've seen Chris Rigg come into the team and put some good performances in recently, which he probably wouldn't have been capable of doing earlier on. So there have been things that have progressed and we have seen improvement on. But I guess you can look at the last 15 results and go, well, if we started the season like that, or if we start next season like that, we're going to be scrapping down the bottom third of the table rather than looking at the top half of the table. So I can understand some concern around some of those performances recently and some of those results. The reality is that the same squad will not be playing next season. There'll be players coming and going. I think, you know, we're in a really good position to add some real quality to the squad. You've got, you know, some of the players that we've mentioned, like Robin Roofs, Noah Siddiqui, Habib Diarra. They're going to be better next season for having the experience of this season. You've seen Lefebvre grow in stature, and he can dominate games at this level. And, you know, if cast your mind back to the start of the season, Lefebvre wasn't even in the bloody starting lineup for the first couple of games, was he?
Yeah.
And he was left behind with the reserve side for a friendly. So, you know, you've got all of this kind of to put together. So it's not quite as simple as just looking at results. But I do understand why there might be a little bit of, not concern, but just people going, I would like to see us improve, because I think you're looking at some of the performance that we put in. We played better in the first half of the season than we have in the second half. But as I say, there's so many factors that come into that. It's not. I think it's difficult to look at it as simplistically as that.
Yeah. Well, last word for you, James, because look, we're only 4 points behind sixth, and because the BBC have decided that football began in 1992, of course, they've stated that it's our best points return since the 2 seventh place finishes under Peter Reid. But with those 3 games to go, you mentioned that they're tough. How significant are they based on the season we've had, and maybe what we want to do in the summer, and maybe that obviously that ambition to kick on?
I think it's tough. I have mixed feelings because I think, like everybody, you want the club to be the best club it can possibly be. You want it to achieve. You want to see it achieve things. And even finishing in the top 10, Sunderland have only done that 4 times in 70 years in the top flight, which is a crazy statistic. So even finishing in the top 10, I think would be really, really good as a newly promoted side. I think Europe is there for a team that wants to go and get it. So I hope the players are aware of that sort of history. Obviously, we've only played in Europe once in our entire history as a club, which was after the 1973 FA Cup win. So I think we've only played 2 ties in Europe, which seems mad considering Sunderland are so often winners of the top flight back in the day when football was at its embryonic stages, and were and are a big club in the English football pyramid. But I think the other side to that is it's still been a very good season, regardless of what happens in the last 3, hasn't it? Nobody would have expected Sunderland to be safe with 3 games to go mathematically, really. We were told it was going to be a struggle. We were told, and probably rightly so in some cases, it's just the club have done well to negate this. But we had less time in the summer because we came up through the playoffs. We weren't going to spend heavily, but then we ended up spending heavily. We had the AFCON lads going, all of this sort of stuff. We aren't going to be able to integrate 13 or 12 new signings, whatever it is. And we've managed to come through all of that adversity and do it with, I wouldn't say ease, but with games to spare and with a little bit of style as well. We've beaten Newcastle twice. We've had really good results. Arsenal at home stands out as a really battling performance. Manchester City at home as well, beating Chelsea away. The point at Anfield, the opening sequence of games Sunderland had, winning on the opening day against West Ham, that was fantastic to do that so convincingly. A real moment at the stadium of coming from behind against Brentford, coming from behind to get a point against Aston Villa at the Stadium of Light. The Bournemouth game, I mean, that was superb. That night fixture, to go 2-0 down and then to come roaring back, was just absolutely amazing. So I think my point is that we've seen some brilliant things this season and we should be grateful. But as a fan, you want, and even as a journalist, you want more, don't you? And it's quite clear that this Sunderland side could possibly deliver more with the right recruitment, perhaps even this season if they manage to get the stuff together. I guess Chris and Martin, me real hope for this season, I would love a top 10 finish. Europe would be absolutely amazing, even if it comes to the Conference League with the financial restrictions. But me wish for the season, whether this happens or not, I don't know, is to go into that final game against Chelsea with the possibility of something happening, because we know Europe could go down to 8 this season. So if we could get to that final game and it's still there, and even if you're looking at results either way, I just think that would be a brilliant atmosphere at the Stadium of Light. Chelsea are there to be got at. I just think that would be marvellous to have that place full and with something to go for on the final day of the season. Whether that happens, I don't know. If they fall short, then I don't think you can criticise them too much, because it's been a brilliant 12 months, a brilliant 24 months after so much pain and heartache and mediocrity of League One. I remember losing that playoff semi-final against Lincoln just after COVID. You just thought, God, when is this going to end?
Bloody hell.
Charlton in the playoff final at Wembley in the last minute, having been gifted a goal, all of this sort of stuff. I think it's crucial that while we want more, we also remember where we've been. I think there's a happy medium. I think social media is quite polarising, isn't it? It falls into 2 camps. Either you're a quote unquote happy clapper and you're happy with the season regardless of what happens, or you're some ruthless nutcase that just wants more and more and more. I think most fans can see the nuance and say that this has been a good season regardless of what happens, but exciting into the future as well. And big questions over the recruitment in the summer. Hopefully they can go again. And if they did get into Europe, it might help Sunderland retain some players. It might help them get some better ones as well. So you just never know.
Yeah, and I think that's a brilliant point to end on. And it just leaves me to say thank you very much, James. Really appreciate your time. And we'll let you get back to your bank holiday and the little one as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll be working today and tomorrow after on the short straw. So that's just one of those things. I did, in fairness, have last Wednesday off for my fiance's birthday, so I'll take one for the team and work bank holiday Monday.
Well, that's it. Well, you can laugh at them because it's chucking it down with rain, so they're not,
yeah,
they're not in a beer garden, so it makes you feel better.
I'll send Phil a message now and gloat.
Good stuff. Well, thanks again, James and Martin. Thanks again as always. And just a quick word on what we've got to come, because we've got a double whammy this week, haven't we? Instead of on this week, we've got a Legends piece, and we've got something on. A fantastic manager, but someone who rocked up and played for Sunderland for a bit before that.
We have, yes. We've obviously completed 52 weeks of On This Week, which we worked out was about 150 hours worth of Sunderland history recorded for posterity. And in that time, we could actually walk from Land's End to John O'Groats. Some of it's there, some of it's not. You can actually walk from Land's End to John O'Groats and listen to all of the podcasts. So you could travel from Sunderland to London on the train about 25 times and never run out of On This Week. So we thought we've done our time with that. So we have turned our attentions to looking at all sorts of random things, haven't we? There's managers, players, matches, incidents, rumours, all sorts of different things that me and you and Kelvin and Andrew will be diving into over the next few years, probably. We're kicking off with a two-parter on Don Revie, and we thought we'd time it with the FA Cup final. Obviously, we've done lots of stuff on the FA Cup final over the years, but this adds a little bit of a different context to the cup final and a different bit of backstory. So in part one, which goes out tomorrow, we are looking at Don Revie's Sunderland career as a player and the relationships and the key people involved in bringing Revie to Sunderland in the first place and how he left the club. And then part two, which will be out next week, so that'll be a week on Monday or a week on Tuesday, depending on what we decide to do. That will be looking at how close Revie actually came to being appointed as Sunderland manager, because there was lots and lots of rumours. The club certainly tried to get him to come and be Sunderland manager before he really achieved massive success at Leeds. And it's an interesting story to follow. I think you were a little bit more cynical than myself and Kelvin were in that podcast, weren't you, Chris? But we'll leave that for the listeners to discover for themselves, I think.
Yeah. It got a little bit heated, so I'm going to look forward to listening to that back. But thanks again, Martin. Look forward to those, and thanks again for your time today, mate. Appreciate it. And thanks again, everyone, for listening. Don't forget, we'll have loads more analysis on the Roker Report website, and of course, we'll have content every day this week as usual. So look out for all of that. But first, it's bye for now.
Hey, Mama. Thanks for making all my favorite recipes.
Hi, Mom. Thanks for your unfiltered advice.
Hi, Mom. Thanks for always being by the phone.
Hey, Mom. Happy Mother's Day.
When you ship UPS Air at the UPS Store, your items arrive on time or your money back. Guaranteed at no extra cost. Exclusively at the UPS Store U.S. retail locations. Visit theupsstore.com/airshipping for full details. Terms and conditions apply. Send your Mother's Day gifts at the UPS Store and we'll get your gratitude there on time.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities, so do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.